Hi guys, welcome to Talking Strongman. I'm absolutely honored to be joined by the 2006 World's Strongest Man, Mr. Phil Pfister. How's things, Phil?
Larry, baby.
We're back. We're back in the same screen. How's things? You good?
Yeah. Suffering the pandemic beautifully. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been one hell of a year. But I see you've still got some weights in the background there. So you still training?
I've never had much of a home gym. I had a pretty good collection of strongman equipment, but once the gyms kind of shut down at the beginning of the year, it's like, oh shit, I got to kind of round up a few odd bits, and and only in the last week or so did I finally drag this stuff inside, and it was almost more for my girlfriend than me. I've not been a serious strength enthusiast or practitioner, rather, since retiring from competition.
Really? So you just
I've kept up with intermittently, but I'm a shadow of my former self.
Oh, you're still looking pretty good there.
Well, thank you. I'm not far from the body weight 101, but the body weight's close to the same, but not much else.
The strength level not quite the same, no.
Yeah.
It's always interesting. I think after like athletes retire, some want to keep training, others they sort of lose that passion as well. I mean, you seemed that when you were doing strongman, you loved the challenge of the awkward type of events. You didn't seem like the gym type training. You didn't seem so fussed on that side of it, did you?
Exactly. In fact, my first years were really dominated with event training and spent very little time in the gym. And then there's only so much event training you can do before you get all the competency. But I think the foundation of my strength really was laid in with the event training, more so than the gym work. And then I kind of filled in the gaps a bit more and tried to build a bit more of the foundation later.
It was definitely noticeable to see. I mean, I've been lucky enough to watch your career as a big fan before, I got involved in strongman myself, and then obviously competed a few times. I think my first ever worlds, actually, you were, heavily involved in West Virginia. That was a 2008 World's Strongest Man.
2008, yeah.
That was my very first.
We were in my last worlds, 2009, as a competitor. You did really well in the farmer's carry.
Yeah, it was my first final, the 2009.
You take second or third in the farmer?
I think I was, second or third. Mariusz was really fast, and then I'm not sure if it was me or Zadrunas took second.
So I was pretty dismayed that all you guys smoked this old man here. I think you took second, maybe.
Something like that. It was, it was my first big performance, I think, a World's Strongest Man. But I want to go back to your. Well, I want you to take me back to what got you into training in the first place. I mean, did you watch Strongman as a youngster, or was it something that you just kind of came upon later in life?
Kind of sheltered from it. I've got a brother that's 9 years older than I am. He was born in '62. I was born in 90 or 71 rather, and he was into bodybuilding and was very athletic and very intelligent and very strong and very fit and a gymnast and all these kinds of things, and a swimmer and a bicycler, and had a pretty good presence at the local gym. And so I'd see the Arnold Schwarzenegger pictures in the magazines when I was a little kid and just kind of be blown away with it. But I never got really into weights until didn't really have much chance really until I was 21. I joined a little gym, and it was some years after that I saw Strongman really for the first time that I could remember in the mid-1990s on ESPN. Okay. And I thought, well, if I was ever a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger, I'd love to do that. And I'm really sure that I could beat a lot of those guys in a lot of those events. I didn't necessarily think I could beat all of them in all of the events, but I knew that I had a shot. So then a few years later, when I was 27, I was in a small powerlifting gym, kind of what you might call a key club gym. All the members had a key. And one of the guys that organized the gym, John Messenger, put up a photocopy that was in Powerlifting USA, photocopied a page for Strongest Man Alive in 1998 in St. Louis, Missouri. And Ahola had just won World's Strongest Man in '97, and he came over for that. And he and I battled it out a little bit for the top spot, or he kind of smoked me, really. But he and I became quick friends. Let's see. But anyway, that's kind of how it all got started. I saw that photocopy in the gym, and some of the guys said, "Oh, Pfister, you need to try that stuff." So I went out to a practice session in May of '98 for this contest, and 5 months later, I was at Worlds.
Wow!
And I put fourth in the world. So it was kind of a quick, steep learning curve that worked out.
You had so much natural strength, didn't you? It was. To be able to just step in like that, a few months training.
Yeah, I'm definitely a bit of a mutant. You know, one time Sven Carlson, Mariusz, and I were in Columbus, Ohio for the Arnold Strongest Man, and we'd gone out to get some sushi, and I drove, and we were talking to the waiter, and Sven was like, talking to the waiter who was really interested in all this stuff, interested in the three of us. And, he was explaining to the waiter that they were, full-time serious professional strongman. And for me, it was just a hobby.
Yeah.
And, it's strongman is just so mind-blowing. And to be able to compete with the strongest men in the world, who will do anything and everything to try to win or try to push themselves. It's just very, very humbling to be able to share that stage and actually be competitive. And if I'm fortunate enough to go out and MC a contest, a small contest or something, all of those guys that show up on a weekend, pay their $50 or $100 to be there, drive for hours and pay for a hotel and food and all that. They're dropping $500 or $1,000 just to go out and, test themselves in front of the public. That's a lot of courage. That's really putting yourself out there. I think that's kind of very heroic and very humbling.
Yeah.
I don't know. What was the question?
Oh, we're just kind of trying to figure out what got you into this sport in the first place. But I like where we go. This is when I chat to people, I just let it flow. It's not like a set of listed questions. We're just having a chat.
It'll be like 6 hours later. Question, but how did I get into it? I guess growing up, I always felt that I was very athletic and very strong, but I never really found my niche.
Did you do sports before you got into strongman?
A lot of football or basketball. I did have some interest in it, but like as a little kid, I got stuck on the line in football, and you just smash into the other guy over and over again and never get much glory or credit, and kind of old, and you get your fingers smashed up and fractured and broken. And coaching in general is just so abysmal, so if you have a great coach, count yourself as fortunate. And I think you almost have to have a good coach, a good mentor to really pull you aside and develop your potential. And that never really happened to me with basketball or with football or anything like that, or baseball. And that wasn't really something I grew up with all the time on the television in my home. And, my pop and mom didn't drag me to all those practices and stuff. Yeah. I grew up with BMX bikes and skateboards, and I built a half pipe when I was 15 years old, built a giant half pipe in my backyard. And
I'd love to see you on a skateboard, Phil.
I built another half pipe 30 years later. I didn't get the dimensions right this time. I kind of overbuilt it, overscaled it. So it's not as useful as the old one was. But anyway, I always knew I was athletic, always knew I was strong, but I never really found my niche athletically. I was into things like rock climbing and kicking hacky sack and snowboarding and jet skiing and cool, fun stuff, as a teenager and a young man. But never anything competitively until strongman.
That's cool, though. Things like rock climbing is going to cross over well to strongman. Just going to help with that grip strength and upper body strength.
Although when you add those 50 or 100 pounds, you can't rock climb very well.
Yeah, that's true. I did a lot of rock climbing as a kid, so a long, long time ago. And then I tried to do some just, wall climbing a couple of years back. It was not a good idea. Being about 350 odd pounds, I think I was at the time. I was. It's very different to when you're a youngster and you can just scale up those walls. It's the body weight. The body weight for us becomes an issue. I mean, I did a lot of sports before I did strongman. One of which kind of makes a lot of people laugh is table tennis, and I had to like a little crack.
Ping pong?
Ping pong, yes. Ping pong, or whiff-waff, some people call it. But I was having a little practice with some friends a few years later. And because of the extra muscle mass that we hold, literally doing about 10 shots, I was just getting like shoulder pump. I just couldn't play to the same level that I could when I was younger. But we end up training specifically for what we're focusing on. And you obviously took strongman very seriously once you got involved in it. I mean, you say 5 months of training and you were competing in World's Strongest Man.
Yeah, my first contest ever was in Iowa. It was Paul Armstrong's Extreme Strongman Challenge. And it was kind of a thing to stand in for the contest that got postponed that I first told you about, that Ahola and I were in. That was scheduled for summer '98, and there was some flooding in St. Louis, so they couldn't hold it. It was going to be held outside, so the guy ended up postponing it from summer until November. And so in the meantime, there had been a lot of interest generated. So this other fellow stepped up to kind of fill the gap, as it were. And I got to win that contest, and Whit Baskin and Brian Neese were there. And there was a handful of other really good athletes that never really got much notice and, kind of fizzled out. But Vi Mafuni was a Samoan guy, and, there were some other guys. And then Jim Davis came along, and he hosted the second contest like a month after Paul Armstrong. And Jim would go on to host many, many contests in the U.S. and help organize kind of a team of promoters. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, we actually had a nice little circuit in the U.S. of 3, 4, 5, 6 contests a year where, the first place guy could go home with $4,000 or $5,000. And even second place, you might go away with $3,000 or $4,000.
It's not bad, to be honest, because it's only very recently, like, top level has got a bit better than that. So
20 years later, when those bucks weren't worth as much either. So yeah, strongman is definitely a very bittersweet sport. But those were the first 2 contests. Worlds was the third. So after winning those first 2 contests, I got invited to Worlds in October. I think I had something like 11 days notice from the time they called me till the time I was to show up in Tangier, Morocco. And I actually did not make it through my qualifying round. I was in a group with Yanni Virtanen and Torfi Olofsson and some Russian gentleman whom I can't remember. There were actually 10 groups of 4 in that.
I remember, yeah.
And Torfi Olofsson from Iceland made it through. And then, so I'd done enough fundraising back home to plan to stay there no matter what and learn all I could. So I stayed on, even though they'd already flown home the guys that hadn't made the finals. And I was staying there on my own dime. And I show up for the morning of the finals as a spectator, and Fleming Rasmussen was ill, and he'd won his group. And they said, "Hey, do you want to be the alternate and take Fleming's spot?" And I was like, "Yeah." So, and that was, probably the toughest year in terms of.
Was this the year that everyone got ill?
Yeah, everyone got sick from just the sanitary conditions in Morocco were horrible, and the food and all that kind of stuff. And also there were a lot of injuries as well.
Yeah.
A lot of injuries and a lot of illness. So I ended up fourth in the final.
So fourth at your first ever World's Strongest Man, 3 contests in.
I was going there to win though. So, fourth.
So it was disappointing. Well, you always had that confidence in yourself. I remember, I think it was 2001 with yourself doing the Hercules Hold. Is that famous? You're there, and
the backstory on that is I was really kind of pissed off, because World's Strongest Man owned by IMG, biggest sports marketing company in the world. Where's the money? You know, they're selling this program all the way around the world to like 100 countries, and you know, there wasn't any trickle down to the guys.
Yeah.
And you know, if you were fortunate enough to win World's Strongest Man, at that time you could go home with like $20,000 or $25,000. But if you were just like the 15th place golfer in the world, you go home with $1 million or $2 million in one weekend. So it just didn't seem right. And 2001 was just after 9/11 in the U.S. when the trade centers came down. Yeah. And so there weren't a lot of people who were super keen to fly because of that. Yeah. So here we were in the middle of nowhere, Zambia, just 6 weeks after 9/11. And I'd said in the athletes meeting that the production folks have with all the guys saying, welcome, you know, do you have any questions? Here's how it all works. I stood up and I said, you know, how about a little trickle down economics? How about taking care of us? And so Jamie Reeves, a few days later in the qualifying rounds, you know, we're standing around chatting. Jamie, of course, the '89 World's Strongest Man from UK and Britain, and the equipment manager, and you know, responsible for handling all the equipment, and he and I had gotten to be pretty good friends, and you know, he's got a great sense of humor. So he's giving me shit, you know, about the little speech I made, and you know, I'm getting ready to do the Hercules Hold, and he's like, "Oh, why don't you give a little speech?" You know, he's just messing with me, and but it kind of got the wheels turning, and I was like, "Yeah, 15 seconds of fame." I had no idea what I was going to say, so, but I practiced the hell out of the Hercules Hold. I had a nice rig at home for it, and so I was actually the last guy to go in my group. When they edited it for the U.S. market, it looks like I'm one of the first guys to go, but being the last guy to go, I knew the mark to beat. So I knew if I got to 45 seconds, I'd take first and get all the points in that event and help my chances going to the final. So if you'll notice in the video, when I get to 45 seconds, I kind of actually stand up a bit straighter, and the handles come in a little bit. And, you know, my mind kind of goes in a different place. And only let go of the handles when I ran out of shit to say.
So you could have kept holding it.
Amen. And let go.
That's interesting. I didn't know that backstory. I thought it was you trying to almost distract yourself, because sometimes when you do a Hercules Hold, it's very painful. You can feel that pain. But sometimes if you do something like that, you start talking, you distract yourself from that pain. I didn't know if it was like a tactic in that respect, or I didn't realize you'd already kind of beaten the time. And
well, if I just had more to say, you know, it would have been.
So you need the Hercules Hold in a final then. Yeah. Have you seen the last couple of years the Giants Live have a Hercules Hold, and Magnus Ver and Kaz both had a go on it. Do you fancy coming out and having a go on that one day?
Well, if given proper notice, perhaps, yes. Yeah. You know, I've got this sick, grandiose fantasy that, you know, someday I might return to Strongman, but it doesn't last very long.
Do some of the Masters comps.
Yeah, something, or just come back and at least try to make it into the finals at Worlds again. Yeah. I mean, that's how sick and grandiose a Strongman really is.
It's the way our minds work. I think it's hard to give up. I keep saying, you know, I officially retired from Worlds last year, and there's part of me that wants to compete, and then I think mentally I'm fine, but physically, whether my body would let me or not is the big issue. And
it's so interesting to see the progression year after year. And you know, when I began in Strongman, the internet consisted of, you know, a couple of talk forums for Strongman. There was no YouTube. There was I mean, that really kind of says it all. And you know, I still don't do Instagram and Snapchat and all this other stuff, you know. I generally speaking stay away from screen time. I like watching YouTube. Yeah, you know, I get sucked into that, and I'll get on Facebook a bit, but God, that stuff's just such a time suck, you know. And you know, the whole business of Strongman, you know, God bless these guys for being able to, you know, make 6 figures a year from it. That's just freaking amazing, you know.
It's that social media side of things which has helped with that.
CrossFit as well. It's built that demographic that otherwise would not exist for powerlifting, for strongman, and it's allowed companies to come along and sell the knee sleeves and sell stuff. It's create a market where there otherwise wouldn't be one, and where guys can actually get some sponsorship. It hasn't always been like that.
No, it really hasn't, as you know yourself, and I know as well. But the fact now you can, I mean, I don't know what it was like when you started, but when I started Strongman, that there wasn't really any weight class competitions or even female competitions. Whereas now you can, in a normal year, let's forget this year, but on a normal year, you'd have contests going on every weekend for various different weight categories. You've got the heavyweights, the light heavyweights, mediums, lightweights, men's classes, women's classes, juniors, masters. Whereas I know when I started, I'm sure it was the same when you did, there was heavyweights and that was it.
But, if you look at a guy like Brian Shaw, I can remember him in, one year, maybe 2011 or something, out in California, Anaheim. I tried to sit down and talk with him and hang out and chat with him. He was like this the whole time with his phone. Yeah. But what I didn't realize was, he's a different generation. He's 11 years younger than me. He's working.
Yeah.
That's the Twitter, the Instagram, and hats off to him. You look at, and you're doing it now. Your videos have 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, or 200,000 views. Some videos, I guess. And these guys have videos that have 250,000 or 1 million or several million views, and Eddie's, gone off in a big way. And takes a lot of work, It
does. I
made the decision early on to not try to market myself or push products or create stuff, because for me, it came back to balance, because it was tough enough to be a strongman, because it was really almost a full job doing that, in terms of fabricating the equipment, housing the equipment, constantly modifying the equipment, not having training partners, dragging all the equipment out from a storage unit into a parking lot, training with it, dragging it all back in. It was just an incredible amount of work. And then eating
on top of that.
And then I worked as a firefighter, and then I had a young child and a wife, and and then all the other stuff that everybody deals with every single day.
Yeah.
So to add a business interest, and I explored some strength related, strongman related business interests, but I decided that my plate was plenty full.
Sure.
So my extra time and energy went to spend a lot of time with my son growing up.
Yeah. And I think that's fair enough. And to be honest, it's still only a few guys that are making, decent money from Strongman. And that's something that's
doing it. Magnus Samuelsson was doing really well, but his home country is very small, and he was known, and he could do, all the little local exhibitions around Sweden and maybe some in other countries as well for the tractor companies and the roof rack companies, Valtra Tractor and Thule Roof Rack, and who knows, half a dozen other Swedish companies, and Mariusz.
Mariusz, yeah.
Yeah, he was such a machine. He was doing I think one year he did 30 contests or 50 contests one year, 50 contests and exhibitions. Did a contest every single weekend, basically, and exhibitions as well. And, but he was a guy that, was literally scratching, scraping, and struggling early on. And, when you come from a background like that and you see opportunity, you really apply yourself, and, it gives you a lot of perspective towards the opportunity that's in front of you. So, but, it's a very short list back then. And even now, I think, like you say, it's really
it's still a short list. There's more opportunities, and I think I hope and think things will keep improving for the athletes and the new generation coming through. But it's still minor compared to other sports. But you
have to do it for the love of the sport.
This is absolutely true.
The bitterness that there isn't more financial reward. I think probably every single great strongman at some level is has some kind of bitterness, you know, going back, you know, to all the guys from the 70s to the guys today. You know, Yanni Vertonghen said after he won World's Strongest Man, I can't believe this is all there is.
Yeah.
It doesn't change your life. It doesn't change your world, you know.
No, I mean, you know,
I was fourth in the world 3 times before I won World's Strongest Man, and I ended up in the finals 7 or 8 times, like 4 fourths, a fifth, a sixth, and a first.
Yeah.
And the first doesn't really change anything other than you can like legitimately hold the title and you get just a little bit more attention.
Can you look back and be proud? I mean, you know, someone like myself, I came 4th at Worlds.
It's validating, but it's not going to make you happy if you're not a happy person. It's not going to add a bunch of extra digits to your bank accounts and buy you some happiness. You know, it's just not, it's a stepping stone, and it's just kind of a validation. And
one thing it's
not life-changing.
No, one thing I noticed by talking to a lot of the you know, the past legends, if you like, the guys that have kind of laid the foundations of the sport, they did it for the love.
He interviewed just a little bit as well.
Yeah, you saw Capes's interview. I need to get Kaz on next. That would be good. Yeah. But
he's actually in Hawaii right now. He was living in Alaska, and before that, he was living in the Philippines, weathering the pandemic. And he called me with some of these, you know, QAnon stuff, and you know, the Kaz got heavy thoughts, and like, Kaz, I don't know about all that. He's like, oh, I'm going to the Philippines. I'm leaving Alaska. It's too cold up there. I'm like, Kaz, go see our friends in Hawaii, man. So he's in Hawaii. We'll try to get him hooked up with your.
That would be brilliant. I'd love to catch up with Kaz. I think he's an amazing character. But
a YouTube channel, huh?
Sorry?
Talk about the need for a YouTube channel.
Oh, he would have a great YouTube channel. That would be just stories with Uncle Kaz would be brilliant. That's always fun. You must have had some good times with Kaz over the years.
Yeah, you know, and just the stories other people tell about him.
Yeah.
I'm not going there, right?
No. I think he's the best person to tell these stories anyway. So, anyway, you mentioned Mariusz Pudzianowski. Then tell me about your battle with Mariusz when you actually won the title, the 2006. You know, Mariusz dominating the sport at the time, I think is probably fair to say. Particularly, I know there was the split and stuff like that, but Mariusz was an unbelievable athlete, and he just.
Yeah, and you know, I saw it. So you asked me to talk about 06, but I tend to think about more a few years before that and a few years after that.
Okay.
Those kind of bookend my impressions of him. So Ahola, I'll go back to Ahola. You know, this is a guy, he and I became really good friends and like a brother to me. But he was 6 foot and 1/4 inches and 265 pounds.
Yeah.
And he won World's Strongest Man twice.
Incredible.
How does that happen? I mean, he's just so tough and strong and determined. Wow. And
three World's Strongest Man contests, first, second, and first.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Oh, wow. So, but when I first saw Mariusz was actually in Finland. I think the second time I went to the Helsinki Grand Prix, he was there.
Yeah.
And that was my first time seeing it. And it was like seeing Ahola version 2.0. It was like the reincarnation and evolution of Ahola. You know, this super athletic, super strong, super tough, super intense strongman.
Yeah.
And you know, there are a lot of really big, strong guys in strongman, but if it's not right here and right here, you know, if they don't have the metal, and you know, Ahola certainly had it, and Mariusz certainly had it, and so that was kind of my first impression, and then so like I'll share a few other impressions of him, but I'll jump forward to 2008 World's Strongest Man in Charleston, West Virginia. I was standing on the boulevard with Kaz, and the fingers were going off. I'm just kind of chatting away and spacing out and relaxed, and got my straw hat on, hiding out from the sun. And Kaz is like watching the action, and we're chatting away. And he's like, "Oh, he's done. He's done. He just hurt himself bad." and he had torn up his calf.
That's right, yeah.
Gastrocnemius or calf or soleus or whatever, and he was limping around that night at dinner, and it happened on the fingers. And the next day, it was the squatting the barrels for reps in his group, and he couldn't squat. I think he might have gotten the first or second squat in, but he was so bad that he couldn't stabilize himself enough to squat. Well, somehow, probably with the assistance of the medical community, we have some doctors on staff at World's Strongest Man and this and that, but somehow that guy comes back and not only wins the final, but he won the plane pull.
Yeah. I remember.
Not being able to walking and not being able to stabilize yourself and squat, to like 3, 4, 5 days later winning the plane pull. I mean,
he had unbelievable intensity and determination.
Yeah. All right. So another Mariusz illustration. We were in Zambia. I don't know if it was 01 or 03. I guess it was 01, the first time we went to Zambia for World's Strongest Man. There's like this bridge, this footbridge over the falls area. And it's like, several hundred feet above the rocks in the water, this elevated sidewalk. And we're all walking through there, Dimmick, Pudzianowski, myself, and they rattle something back and forth to each other in Polish, and the next thing you know, Mariusz just hops up on this footbridge, up on the railings that go side by side, 1 foot on either railing, just, no hesitation, but if he'd stumbled and gone,
he'd be flying.
Did that so he could have his picture taken, and he's just kind of otherworldly guy. Yeah. He and Zydrunas, I never really got to know either of them well because of the language barrier, and also I think because of a competitive thing.
Sure.
But mostly I think because of the language barrier. And Zydrunas is a pretty quiet guy and pretty focused and pretty serious. And Mariusz kind of the same way, but, Mariusz with a little bit more cockiness or confidence.
Oh, definitely.
Whatever. Let's see, what else? I guess, as far as 06, I didn't pay much attention to Mariusz because it was all about me competing with myself and me being the best. And, Strongman is you're competing against all the other guys, but you're really competing against yourself.
Yeah.
The 2006 World's Strongest Man when I won, the qualifying rounds were actually a hell of a lot tougher on me than the finals. And I struggled and stumbled in the qualifying a little bit, 2, 3, 4 events in. It wasn't until the last event or two in the qualifying, a couple of events in the qualifying, that I really kind of have that confidence and, relaxed. I struggled a hell of a lot with the car walk, and I was really frustrated. And unfortunately, a few days later, I was able to turn it around on the car walk. But yeah. The other Mariusz Zydrunas story is most people probably didn't notice or don't remember, but I think it was 2000 when we were in Sun City. Zydrunas, Pudzianowski, and Pfister were all in the same qualifying round.
That's crazy when you look back. I remember watching that. I think, when you look back and you see that group, that's crazy. Absolutely nuts.
And Zydrunas didn't make it to the final that year.
Yeah.
I edged him out in the Atlas Stones, and I got to go to the final. And I think, speaking of Zydrunas, you asked about Mariusz, but I'll just say this about Zydrunas. He's kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum from Mariusz. Mariusz came on like fire and athletic and just phenomenal. 1998, Zydrunas and I were at our first World's Strongest Man, and he didn't make it into the finals either. I squeaked in as an alternate. He actually was doing the Atlas Stones and fell over onto his back with the stone still on his belly, and got sandwiched between the stone. And, I don't think a lot of people remember that. And for me, I don't say that to belittle him or make fun of him, but I say it's a testament to his dogged determination and how far he progressed and how long his road work was. So I think it's almost more impressive that, you know, he wasn't this natural instinctive athlete that got things like that, but he worked his ass off for it.
Yeah, he really did. He had that just steady progression over the years. Nothing was rushed. He just got better and better and better.
I remember one year at the Arnold, we had this hammer raising event. It was a little bit like the Fingal's finger, except it was much heavier, and you got under it and you sort of
you like shoulder shunted it up, didn't you?
Yeah, or you could use your back or just any way to raise it. And he had a really, really tough time with it. And, you know, obviously he was absolutely one of the strongest guys there from a brute strength kind of standpoint, always. But it wasn't a natural event for him. It wasn't easy for him.
Yeah.
He struggled. And then Brian Siders, you know, the IPF world champion powerlifter and local guy that I trained with. You know, and the only guy to ever go to the Arnolds that wasn't a strongman, that wasn't a full-time real strongman, the only guy ever to cross over and do it year after year and turn in good results there, man. He just got under that thing and just kind of nudged it, and it just went.
Brian was an unbelievably strong guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, I remember one year Brian just destroyed the axle on doing some reps, like 6 reps with a 366-pound axle, or maybe it was 7 or 8, I think. And Zydrunas had to go after him, and I think Zydrunas managed to one best him on the axle rep-wise. And Brian told me, "Did you see his face? You know, he like gave him this evil look of like, holy fuck, man, I can't believe you pushed me that hard." You know, after the axle, but and. Brian was the first guy to pull four tires on each side of the Hummer deadlift off the stage. He couldn't lock it out. He got it up to, you know, 70, 80%, and actually did it twice, but it was just kind of oscillating too much at the top or whatever. But yeah, I'm really proud of Brian. He was good.
Do you still stay in contact with Brian?
I've never seen, bar none, with a barbell. I never saw that guy miss a lift. The only time I ever saw him miss lifts were training strongman.
Yeah. Do you still stay in contact with him? Because I remember, you know, competing against him and watching him, and then just seemed to vanish.
He's always been kind of like the abominable snowman and you know, Bigfoot. He's always been kind of mysterious and elusive, but if you know where to hunt him, found. And my favorite Brian Siders story is like the first year he went to the Arnold as a competitor. Sven Carlson and you know, some of those guys knew that I worked at a group home with mentally challenged adults and stuff, managing the group home. And they saw Brian with me, and they thought he might have been one of the clients. Brian always has these big kind of bug eye.
I remember.
And my brother said, "You know why Brian's always got that huge grin? Because he knows he's the strongest guy in the gym."
Well, I remember watching him, and he was a legitimately, when it came to static strength, unbelievable. I remember he was at Worlds in 2008 and hated all the moving events, but when it came to the static stuff, he was a beast.
Yeah, and he had that was his one and only Worlds, and he got a last-minute invite. And he had to do this squat lift thing, and it didn't translate well. No. He wasn't comfortable in that machine. You know, I was just telling someone today who stopped by that when Brian's would get ready for IPF Worlds, frequently he wouldn't have anybody to spot him. And he'd be squatting at home with, you know, 400 plus kilos with no spotters, you know, 410, 420, 430, you know, 900 plus pounds. If he was lucky, he'd have one guy that weighed about 130 pounds or 60 kilos there trying to spot him. So I never miss lifts in training.
Yeah. That's incredible.
When we went to the Arnolds, and Sven thought that might have been one of my clients, but Jamie Reeves and his brother Jockey were there officiating and handling equipment and stuff. And they just were very effusive and respectful towards Brian, and just really held him in very high regard. You know, IPF at that time being the gold standard for powerlifting internationally, and him breaking the world record total held by Kazmaier that stood for over 20 years. Broke it like 7 times. And ultimately took it to 2650, but whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
But don't expect him to cut the grass.
I would never ask any strongman to do that unless it was a ride on. I think we'd all be a bit more comfortable then.
It was garage gym, and he had 2 lawnmowers, and I don't think he ever started either one of them. You know, the guys going in and out of the gym would just kind of take pity on Brian's wife and the situation and grab
do it for him,
fire it up, and take 20 or 30 minutes to cut the grass. You know, I mean, the guy was, you know, a good parent and all this kind of stuff, and would show up at work, but I mean, his real love was the iron, and so like his wife said, "Oh, let's build a gym. You know, we're having a child. You know, you need to be home more." He was home, but he was out in the gym the whole time.
Tell me about I want to talk a bit more about 2006 because, and I know it's hard sometimes talking about yourself. It's a weird one. I don't particularly like doing it, but it was such an iconic win because, like you say, you struggled in the heats, and then you came back, and some of the events that you struggled on.
First 2 events, I stumbled a bit. You know, I didn't dominate the first 2, and then I managed to go on and win the last 5 events.
Was it five events in a row you won to take that title, and pipping Mariusz on the stones? How did that feel? I know we've said like it didn't change your life or anything like that, but how did it feel for personal satisfaction, you know, achieving your ultimate goal, I guess, to be the world's strongest man?
It was a big relief, actually, just to win the title. It was really just a big relief. But I don't know if you've heard the phrase flow, and it's talked about in athletics and in life. And, you know, the sort of standard definition of flow is when your preparation meets your challenges, or when your skills and experiences are perfectly matched with your challenges. And I've never experienced flow so profoundly as when I did the Atlas Stones in the final.
Yeah.
And so some of the characteristics of flow are that it's like having an out-of-body experience, and you go on to autopilot. So you're literally kind of like watching yourself in slow motion because time shifts as well. And it's not like you're deliberately, consciously doing things. They're just happening. It's almost like you're an observer of yourself. And, you know, and then you got the exact opposite of flow, which is like, you know, you're struggling and you can feel, you know, every ounce of a 80-pound stone. And, you know, you feel all the muscle fibers in your low back and your hamstrings, and you feel all the, you know, ripping of the skin, and, you know, that's not flow.
Okay. Well, I know what that feels like for sure.
So like when it came down to the Atlas Stones, you know, that was like the big deal. That was the last and final event. Mariusz was half a point ahead, and it had been raining in China, just kind of a drizzle. So the stones are usually done on kind of a painted plywood surface, you know, like in a grassy area, and then they build a floor, and, you know, it's painted up nice, and so it's a little slick because it's painted wood in the rain. And, you know, so I knew I didn't want to hurry because I didn't want to slide. So I was just kind of, I'd made up my mind to be kind of cautiously aggressive, and actually wore Olympic lifting shoes, just to, you know, minimize any energy lost, you know, in terms of the vertical aspect of it, you know, the efficiency there, lifting them from the ground to the platform.
Yeah.
But it certainly doesn't help you go from spot to spot to be wearing those kind of shoes, and especially in the rain. So I was just determined to be efficient and not make any mistakes, just kind of take my time and realize that it didn't matter how fast I put up the first 4 stones. It would come down to the 5th stone. And it's like classic World's Strongest Man finale is always, you know, these battles that come down to the 5th stone. And, you know, prior to that, the one that stuck out in my mind was Manfred Erbel and Magnus Ver Magnusson, you know.
Yeah, I remember.
There have been several of those over the years, but so nothing real. And then Derek Poundstone a few years later in Charleston.
That was crazy.
You know. So anyway, you know, as I'm loading these stones, I hear Mariusz's stone rattle onto the platform just a split instant before mine were. So I knew I was kind of right on the pace, but I knew none of it mattered, so I didn't get rattled. And just kind of being cool, calm, and collect. And, you know, I put my fifth one in the hole, and I'm glancing over at the same time, and his isn't in the hole yet. And just, you know, kind of like looking at the camera guy saying, did I win? And looking at the guys, you know, is it real? Did I win? You know, and we're like, yeah. And, you know, because you have to kind of pinch yourself, and, you know, it's so freaking grandiose. You know, ultimately it's just another strongman contest. It's just, you know, a TV title, and, you know, but legitimately, I think it is the most dynamic sport in the world. You know, it tests a man like no other sport.
Yeah.
It's like 20 different events, and all their variations. So there's, you know, what tests a person like Strongman? I mean, and you know, so I think it's the most dynamic test of an athlete. And how can you not be a fan of it? I mean, but at the same time, it's so horrible and it's so brutal.
It does destroy us, doesn't it?
It's the most bittersweet sport. And, you know, if you're truly passionate about something, then you set yourself up for a hell of a lot of frustration and suffering. With passion, you know, comes suffering. And there's no way around it.
If you want to be good at something,
yeah,
you have to understand it's not going to come easily. You've got to put, you know, not just time into this, but like you say, it's physically so demanding. There's going to be times where you feel like you're against a brick wall and not going anywhere, but there are those slim moments that just make it all.
Or, you know, you might win a title or you might win some prize money, but that's all, you know, vanishing. It's like, you know, does anybody know who Johnny Perry is? Does anybody know who Mike Jenkins is?
Yeah.
You know, even among strongmen, you know,
I know who they are both well, but yeah, I know, I understand totally.
It's horrible. It's really a shit sport to be in, but I love it. I love it, and it's given me so much, and it's done so much. So it's also the most wonderful sport to be in. You know, and when that odd fan does turn up, and, you know, they can't contain their glee at being, you know, at getting to, you know, meet you and get an autograph or a picture just for a moment, you know. And it's such a fantastic sport because it's just so, I think that the best way to characterize it is it's larger than life personalities attempting challenges that most people would not even conceive of.
Mm.
It's a showcase of human struggle. The essence of Strongman is a showcase of human struggle in a way that most people could never conceive of, with larger than life personas attempting these things and, you know, pushing themselves to the maximum. It's freaking nuts, man. And,
it is.
You know, and every year the guys are so much stronger. And I think a lot of that has to do with YouTube, you know, because 800-pound deadlift used to be huge.
Yeah.
Not that long ago.
Oh, I say this to people now because, you know, my best ever deadlift was 435, which I did in a competition.
That's huge.
It's huge. Well, I used to consider it huge. At one time, it was huge. Now, you tell someone you lift 435 kilos, you know, well over 900 pounds. You're talking 950 pounds. Like, oh, that's rubbish. Eddie Hall does 1,100 pounds, or Thor does, you know. It's like the standard has improved. And yes, those lifts are incredible, but 800-pound deadlift is a massive deadlift still.
You know, when I was starting out in 98, David Webster's, you know, Sons of Samson books 1 and 2 were like the encyclopedias of strength and strongmen. And he talked about Kazmaier. And now Kaz had done an 860-pound deadlift at an exhibition on some banged up, shitty Scottish Douglas Edmonds bar that he wouldn't have had in his kit.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, so that was like kind of the gold standard, you know, just 22 years ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, 800 pounds is still 800 pounds. It's a hell of a lot of weight. But when you see teenage kids doing it on YouTube, suddenly, you know, YouTube like tears down the barriers of conceptually what's possible. And it's done it not just in deadlift, but in every single aspect of strongman. You've got all these amateur guys pressing 350-pound logs.
I think it's just access to information, to visually see other people doing these things. It sort of mentally makes you break barriers down. So, you know, when we started, there was just, you know, you're training in your garage or your gym, and there's a few people around, and that's it. So there wasn't every day now. If I know you don't go on Instagram, but, you know, I'll scroll through and there'll be 400, you know, 900-pound squats and deadlifts. It's just become the norm. But that being said,
mind blowing.
That being said, I still believe a lot of the past greats, with the modern kind of training, with the modern evolution in you know, nutrition, the guys now take it very, very scientifically. It's not, you know, back when we were competing, it was you have your events day, you train the events, you know, you get information from the other guys. But now they're talking to doctors and scientists, and they're you know, their nutrition is, there's athletes that take their own food to competitions now. They don't just eat the, you know, could you imagine in Morocco turning up with your own food? It would have made a huge difference to so many people's performances. I've heard from yourself and other people, almost everyone got food poisoning that year.
Yeah.
So the guys just take it a lot more seriously. So obviously the performances, they're always looking for those extra few percentages to be better.
I think in 2010 at Wingate University or World's Strongest Man 2010, I think it was North Carolina. I think that's the right year. It might have been
2011. Yeah.
Yeah, 2011. So Kaz and I are standing there watching the finals. That was my first of 3 years working as a commentator. And 5 guys deadlifted over 940 some odd pounds. I mean, he and I were just blown away, you know? I mean,
yeah.
And that's 10 years, that's 9 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, five years prior to that wasn't happening.
No.
I mean, it's just mind-numbing. It's just mind-numbing. And, you know, that's for a guy who's competed and won World's Strongest Man, competed 13 years. And what about the guy who's just starting out? You know, I mean,
it's crazy. I think it's quite intimidating for guys starting out.
And also, that's just kind of like one metric. You know, I think you get these 900+ pound deadlifters, you know, showing up in the, you know, the guys that make it through to the finals at Worlds every year. It's almost like now the guy who doesn't fly apart, the guy that doesn't get injured, is kind of the one who ends on top. Was the way one of my friends put it recently. I got to thinking about that. I wasn't so sure about it, but I think there's some truth to that. So I'm not so sure that, you know, a 900-pound deadlift, you know, is the same thing as, you know, a crazy performance on the Husafell Stone or on, you know, a farmer's walk. Strongman's changed a lot. I don't know that it's the same sport. You know, I don't know.
Do you think from just event changes you're talking about, or the weight changes?
You know, I mean, it's almost like a contest to see who can press the 400 and 500 pound logs and deadlift the 1,000-pound deadlifts.
I think that there's a lot of those one event competitions now that people focus on.
Still carry, you know, a Husafell stone.
Yeah.
60, 70, 80 meters, let alone 90 or 100. You know, they had the Husafell stone not long ago. I guess they had something like that at the Arnold not long ago.
They did have a natural stone as part of the Arnold's, yeah.
I thought those guys would have done better with that, especially since it was, you know, kind of announced in advance. You know, so I think it is almost a bit more of a powerlifting contest. So in some respects, you know, you see a guy like Kiełzakowski, you know, who can muscle up those giant boulders up to his shoulder, you know, when all the other guys were struggling. That one year at the Arnold, and I think one year in Venice, he did like some kind of 380-pound log or 430-pound log for 5 reps or something. With
that guy does so many just mind-boggling things. He's
I mean,
incredible.
Yeah, I'm not taking anything away from any of these guys. And when you see someone like that throwing those kind of performances, it's just like, you know, strongman has always been kind of mind-blowing, but it's just like every year it's just like crazier.
It seems to be like, what's the limit? They just seem to be getting better and better and better.
But it also sort of simultaneously seems like some things are kind of getting lost, like the Husafell stone carry. Yeah, I just wonder how many of these guys that can deadlift 900 or 1,000 pounds and press, you know, a 450-pound log can take a spin with the Husafell stone for 60 or 70 meters.
Would you like to see a little bit more variety? Like, I think was it 2006 when you won that you did the stone press overhead? I can't remember.
Yeah.
So that wasn't necessarily the heaviest weight being lifted, but very awkward objects. And you managed to cope with it a lot better than, say, you know, guys that might have beaten you for a max log.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know that was the best event, but I think it was a good event. I'd like to see more of the kind of natural stones. You know, those were sort of granite blocks. I'd love to see, you know, they did it one year in a cave, like was it in the 90s or in France or something? They lifted natural stone block.
Yeah, I think Gary Taylor and Magnus Ver Magnus and those type of guys.
It's just amazing that Gregor Edmonds and all those folks at World's Strongest Man put on such a fantastic show and such a fantastic contest. They're so freaking masterful at being able to pick the right difficulty of weights. Yeah, you know, to properly challenge the guys, but not squash them. You know, that's truly an art. That they're truly masterful at the way they fine-tune the difficulty of those events.
It's very hard to do with the evolution of the athletes. I think, like you say, and I think one of the reasons the athletes have improved so much is they just have the equipment is there to train on all the time. Yeah. Now, you know, there's gyms. Every gym, strongman gym you go to now has strongman equipment. Even regular gyms have strongman equipment now, whereas that was just non-existent even when I started. So I'm sure when you started, it was.
I made my own Atlas stones out of concrete.
Yeah,
they're all misshapen and all this, and made every single piece of equipment I've ever had. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's now you've got these companies like Rogue, for instance, selling beautifully engineered kit, and you know everyone can get the identical dumbbell that they'll use at the Arnold's, for instance, or the log, or whatever it might be. Whereas I guess when you guys were competing at the Arnold's, the only time you got to touch that kit was when you got there.
Yeah, you know, some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen in strongman are like a 70-year-old lady flipping a tire, or like 120-pound guy flipping a 750-pound tire and struggling for like 30 seconds to get one flip in, you know, get the first one. You know, so strongman is just fascinating and entertaining, and it's truly accessible and to anyone. You know, like one of my favorite memories ever is like my son, when he was like 12 or 13 months old, just, you know, been walking for a few months, and I had an ATV or four-wheeler, a quad bike. You know, I'd had the tires changed, and one of the tires was laying off on the driveway, and he just walks up to it and starts flipping.
He's been watching you.
Yeah, and I was a little kid, and we were, you know, at a strongman contest in Boston, and in the hotel room, and he starts flipping the suitcase across the room. You know, it's like an 11 or 12-month-old child, and you know, I remember being a contest in Miami Beach when he was like, you know, 15, 16 months, and he found a wooden 6x6 or 4x4 block and picks it up, and you know, that's like my favorite picture ever. It's like him just pressing this block. And
how old's your son now?
He's 20 now.
Does he lift?
He lifts a little bit. You know, when the summer when he was between 9th and 10th grade, he was about 15. He actually became taller than Dad.
Wow.
And went up to about 140 kilos.
Okay. He's a big boy then.
Not fat, yeah. And he'd been lifting kind of casually at a friend's gym, off and on for about 4, 5, 6 months. But he kind of put the weights down, and it's only recently picked him up, and he kind of leaned out and lightened up, and that's the biggest and heaviest he's ever been, was 5 years ago. And
clearly good genetics, though.
Yeah. I kind of wish he'd found a passion for football, so he could take care of old dad. But
Strongman's not going to cut it. Just before I let you go, Phil, I want to. So do you follow Strongman these days, or not so much?
Sure. I try to catch the some of the world's strongest man, like reruns on YouTube, or look online for them when the results are timely. And Brian just had that contest. Brian Shaw Classic, and
that's right.
He put up some of the deadlift stuff today. I didn't subscribe, Brian. Sorry, I'm a really old, tight guy. But anyway, and how cool is that? How awesome is that? I mean, I wish I could do stuff like that, but I'm just not quite the businessman that Mr. Shaw is.
Yeah, no, like you said, when he was starting out and he was doing all those, social media posts and stuff, it's paid off big time for him in the long run. Yeah. And I mean, he's got a hell of a
very hard on both aspects, the business aspect of strongman and actually being an awesome strongman.
Yeah, and hopefully it's just going to help the sport keep growing, and events like that will, with the reach of like social media, the YouTube kind of stuff, it's getting new people involved into the sport, which is only a good thing.
Brooks has done fantastic as well. Something a lot of folks don't realize is it's just miraculous that World's Strongest Man is still occurring year after year, and that Giants Live and the Arnold Classic, without those kinds of things, there'd be no strongman. It's a real struggle for the producers, and hopefully they make some money, but I think for the most part that they could better spend their efforts elsewhere if it was all about money, because there's hopefully they can turn that around, but we've been saying that for 40 plus years. Early on, I talked to Magnus and talked to Kaz about all this stuff, and they said, it's always just been right on the verge of going big. And people don't realize it's the whole time that there has been strongman, it's always just been hanging on.
Wow.
It's so cool to see the backyard contests, the amateur contests, and the weight classes and this and that. So in many ways it has grown, and you can get the equipment now and this and that, but it's still just kind of this fringe cult thing that a handful of people, kind of really keep going at the highest level, contest wise. And it's so awesome that Brian has now joined the ranks, and I hope he can continue to do that year after year.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. Just very last question then, because you've been lucky enough to compete against many of the best. You're obviously world's strongest man yourself. Out of the guys that you competed against, I mean, you've competed against loads of legends of the sport. Who do you regard as the greatest that you were up against? So maybe not like the whole 40 years of strongman, but just within your generation, because you've gone, I guess, from Ahola to, I guess, Brian Shaw.
I think Shaw is the guy that I think is really top of the heap at one time or another. Zydrunas, he has that kind of, maybe a bit more power than Shaw, and maybe for longer. Kaz, in terms of believing it with every fiber of your being that you're truly the strongest man to ever walk the planet, at least in your day. And I think to the core of his being, I don't think there's probably anyone who ever really, ate, lived, slept, breathed it, and believed it like that guy.
I agree. I genuinely think if Kaz competed now, he'd still be one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, and You know, Mariusz, I think Mariusz absolutely is one of the most impressive. Half Thor.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, Half Thor never, you know, kind of bowed out kind of early. And I think Eddie in terms of he's got that kind of
The mindset.
otherworldly, willing to risk it all.
Very similar to Kaz, I would say, in that respect.
Yeah, nearly psychotic, nearly completely out of balance.
Yeah.
You know, fanaticism, grandiosity, dedication, insanity. And that's why, you know, if this fight happens with Thor and Eddie, you know, you can't discount Thor just because of the physical potential there. I mean, that guy's a freaking mutant.
Yeah.
And, but Eddie's, you know, just, you know, he's not going to leave the ring unless he's absolutely given 100%. And he is thinking about it every waking moment from now until then and doing his best to prepare for it. I mean, if you watch this little documentaries, you know, there are two or three that are like an hour or an hour and a half long, and you get a peek behind the scenes of what's going on behind those eyes, man. That guy's out there. And, you know, when I met Eddie, you know, he struck me because he came up very nice, very humbly, and said, just want to introduce myself. You know, I don't know exactly what he said, but it was something like, I've enjoyed watching you, you're a hero to me, or something like that, or an inspiration or something. I don't know what he said. I don't know if he used the word here, but it shocked me. And it was very respectful and very humbling. And that almost never, ever, ever happens amongst elite strongmen. That was a unique experience for me at World's Strongest Man. And it was after I'd become a broadcaster and not a competitor. And I never really got to know Eddie very well. And I really honestly kind of discounted him, because here's a guy with a mohawk.
I think a lot of people did early on.
You know, and, you know, lots of beach muscle and really good at the deadlift and a good presser. But I'd seen that before, you know, that I wrote him off as one of those guys that, you know, you see comes on like a comet, comes on, you know, like a blazing comet, and then he's gone. And nothing really happens. You know, they might make it in the top 5 or something like that, but they're not going to be the guy standing on the podium. They're going to be gone before they've got, you know, the experience and the skill and, you know, to make it all go together. So I didn't pay a hell of a lot of attention to him. Yeah. It shocked the hell out of me when he won World's Strongest Man. And I saw him in 2016. When did he win? 17?
17, yeah.
I saw him in 2016. I hadn't been to the Arnold in 6 years, and saw him backstage. And I was like, holy shit, man, that guy does not look good. He looks like he could fall over and die any second. You know, he's just sitting there waiting for his turn to deadlift back behind the stage. And, you know, you see guys that are purple and red and having trouble breathing and, you know, don't look relaxed. And, you know, I really, really respect him for exiting the sport. What he did. And you have to have some kind of appreciation for someone who's willing to put it all out there. That's not me.
No, I was going to say, I'm probably similar to yourself.
I want to fight another day.
There's other things that are more important, but you have to respect someone's willingness to go to that level, to achieve their goals. And I think
it's fantastic that he's found another avenue for that in this grudge match against Thor. And, you know, and also another avenue for it in marketing himself as, you know, this persona, this world.
Well, he just seems to be one of those people that no matter what he puts his mind to, he's going to give it 100%. And
he acknowledges that there's sacrifice with it, and he talks openly about it. And I think that makes him all the more accessible and real and valid. And, you know, he owns his sense of self. You know, I think that's very empowering to a person to not only be honest with themselves, but to be honest with others. And he has that ability. So
definitely.
So, you know, who are the guys that I respect or think are kind of the ultimate competitor? it's really, really difficult to pick just one. You know, I think Mariusz and Zydrunas and Brian and Eddie and Kaz and Ahola, man. I mean, that guy was 6 foot and 1/4 inches and 265. You know, everybody.
Did you turn up? Did you turn up when you saw him?
It was like, in a room, I'll say that.
Yeah. You look at him and he turns up. You'd be like, "Who's this guy?" And then suddenly he competes and he's just a machine.
But there's so many guys that could really shock you. You know, Terry Hollins. You know, when he's big and dumpy and strong, he moved like lightning.
Yeah.
I mean, where'd all that speed come from? Fleming Rasmussen, same thing, big dumpy guy, but moved like amazing.
Yeah.
Yanni Bertanen, built like a toothpick. So much pulling power. So much.
I think that's one of the great things.
The guy right there. I mean, you know, I said, you look like Cousin It from the Addams Family. What the hell are you doing here? You know, I'm like, you don't look like a strongman. You don't look like an athlete. You don't look like a power lifter. You must have taken it personally, because like then you end up a few minutes or a few days later or a year later, like smoking me and everybody else on the farmer's walk. You know, the only one that edged you was Mariusz. You know, I don't know, man. I don't know who the top is, but I think Eddie's definitely got that sort of otherworldly, other level thing that Kaz had. I don't know if he has it quite the same way that Kaz did, but they're different eras. And, you know, the other thing is Zydrunas. I think being world's strongest man, I think, sorry, Mr. Hall, but I think it means the ability to endure. You know, one of the qualities, one of the defining characteristics of strength is the ability to endure. And Zydrunas, you know, you had him on recently. I watched the interview because I know very little about him, because he's not a talkative guy. But 30 years, you know, from a teenager.
Well, his first Worlds was the same as yours.
Yeah, 98, but he was training strength before that, and he's kind of still going.
Still competing now, yeah.
And he won, what, 4 Worlds and 8 Arnolds or something like that?
Unbelievable.
I kind of think the Arnold's was suited for him and tailored for him, arguably in some ways. And
he won two of the ifs.
And his wife loves Zydrunas, and they like picking events year after year that worked well for Zydrunas. You know, not to belittle him, but you know, he won all those contests, and he won them all legitimately. And it took him a long time to get his first World's Strongest Man, but he got 4 of them. And when he won World's Strongest Man, I was an announcer then, and I was the first person to run up to him with a T-shirt for him to sign. And he signed it. I said, "No, you're not done." Did not put WSM.
Yeah.
And I gave that T-shirt to Terry Todd, but I think that you have to really look at someone's longevity when you think about this. But you know, again, he's not that sort of natural, intuitive athlete that someone like Mariusz was.
Yeah.
You know, so there are a lot of different ways to consider it.
Well, it's so true. I mean, your name will always go.
One more, motherfucker. Me.
Yes,
Me.
there we go. That's what we want to see. I was just going to say, you did pretty well for, you know, you were never the power lifter. You were never the best at the squatting and the deadlifting and those type of things. But when it came to those athletic moving events, the awkward strongman events, you just had that natural power.
They were kind of a natural fit. But, you know, I noticed like in 2001 or 2000 or 2003, all the kind of dumpy powerlifter guys that had the brute strength and the static strength, holy shit, now they were like going really fast in the farmer's walk, and now they were like zooming around with the Conan's wheel. So, you know, it's always evolving, and it's always been evolving. And, you know, I was very fortunate to be kind of like in the top 10 the whole time I competed. I think I was legitimately in the top 10 always when I competed. top 10 in the world. And hopefully, you know, somewhere closer to the top 5, but almost never the top 1, 2, or 3. You know, it's just one time that I was able to squeak through.
You only need to do it once.
Well, that was when the IFSA split had occurred and all that kind of stuff. And I was with IFSA for a little while as well. And I think I finished maybe 6th in the world that year or something. I can't remember. But there's such a huge difference between, you know, in my era, it was Magnus Samuelsson and Joko Hola and Sven Karlsson. Those were the top guys. And the era before that, it was Ricky Kiri and Magnus Ver. But those top 1 or 2 guys, and occasionally a third guy, they're head and shoulders above the guys that are 3rd place, 4th place, 5th place, 6th place. You know, in any sport, it's like that. You've got 1 or 2 guys who can win at all times.
Yeah.
And, you know, 3rd, 4th, 5th, it's a different tier. And
I can vouch for that. I've been up against the likes of Zadrunas, Brian Shaw, Thor, Eddie, those kind of guys. But it's been awesome. I still enjoyed it, and I've had like you did. I've had my days where I've beaten them all. So it's we can always look back and enjoy them.
To be on your show and relive some of this kind of stuff, but it's mind blowing to, you know, think back that I was one of those guys and I got to do that stuff, and you know, I'm sick enough and grandiose enough to occasionally fantasize about doing it again.
I'd love to see that, Phil. It's been a pleasure to have you on. Really, really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you again for coming. It means a lot. And
have a beautiful Christmas and holiday and all that.
You too. Stay safe. I hope your family have a great Christmas.
Wear a mask, damn it.
And more importantly than that, I want to see you back competing in a Masters comp. You and me going head to head in a Masters show.
What you wish for, Shahlaei.
Let's bring it. Bring it. Take care, Phil. All the best. Bye-bye. While you're here, guys, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my awesome strength content.